number 10 is Deadpool. Deadpool is a bit of a shocking way to kick off this list. He himself is like almost a mutant, but not actually a mutant, but he also says he's a mutant, but is then corrected by the actual mutants, and then sometimes people classify him as a mutant, but then others will classify him as not one. Do you understand why it's a little confusing? His mutant healing factor was derived from Wolverine's own, and he became who he is thanks to Weapon X, which are notorious for working on mutants. But whether he is a mutant or not, one thing is definitely true. Despite the fact that Wade has tried to count himself among their numbers, Deadpool finds the X-Men to just be a little too annoying for his own tastes. And that feeling basically just stems from the fact that they take things way too seriously, where he takes almost nothing seriously, which means when he does work with them, it's usually not for a very long time. To say Deadpool hates anyone feels kind of wrong. I think he's just kind of insane, but he definitely finds them annoying. Number 9, Black Bolt. The Inhumans are essentially a species of mutants created by the Kree experimenting on humans a long time ago. One of the ways the Inhumans came to be was through the Terrigen Mists. When they're exposed to the mists, they gained powers and they would become an Inhuman. Unfortunately, a cloud of Terrigen Mists found its way to Earth, and it turns out that these mists are incredibly deadly for the mutant population. The mutants eventually learned that they could change the composition of the mist in order to make it safe for mutants, but at the cost of not creating more Inhumans. The problem is, it didn't actually make sure that was okay to do with the Inhumans. They just started attacking the Inhumans, causing a conflict and causing Black Bolt to use his Scream to take down Cyclops. This resulted in Emma Frost using Dazzler to attack Black Bolt and leave him imprisoned in limbo and without the ability to use his powers. The worst part is that if the X-Men just talked to the Inhumans, which they eventually do, the Inhumans are totally cool with figuring out a resolution. So I'm kind of on Black Bolt's side with this one. Look, I definitely know some of these choices will split people's opinions, so this is a perfect opportunity to invite you down to the comments to make sure you let me know your thoughts on my opinions here. I'm giving you my takes with examples, so I'd love to hear your well-informed opinions. Coming in at number 8 is Blade. Blade is someone who sometimes feels like he's relegated to his own corner of the Marvel Universe, a fact that he and mutants technically kind of share. But Blade is also pretty damn ruthless. His main self-appointed purpose in life is to eradicate vampires. It's what he lives for. But when one of those vampires is also a mutant, then it causes some discourse. During the X-Men Curse of the Mutants, the X-Men, and more specifically Cyclops, asked this vampire slayer for his expertise and assistance in dealing with their vampire problem. When the depowered mutant Jubilee was turned into a vampire though, Blade wanted to exterminate her, straight up, which shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. But Blade also shouldn't have been surprised that the X-Men were not down for this course of action. The disagreement may not have been Blade hates the X-Men, but going to a vampire slayer and expecting him not to do what he does is a little annoying, don't you think? I think so. Number 7, Wasp. Look, you may not agree with me on this one, and that's fine. But I will source one point of evidence that Wasp does not have a favorable view of the X-Men and mutants in general. In Uncanny Avengers, which followed the X-Men vs. Avengers arc and ended with the passing of Xavier at the hands of Cyclops, Captain America decided that the best way to repair things was to put more mutants onto the Avengers and have the new team, led by Alex Summers, Havoc. That's Cap cherry-picking the best-looking mutants to represent them, but the addition of a few mutants to the Avengers under the ideology of a Professor X meant that some things changed around the Avengers mansion. Like when Rogue tried to replace a painting of the original Avengers with a painting of Xavier. It's in a bit of poor taste, sure, but when Wasp walked in on it happening, she was more than a little upset. And it seemed genuinely anti-mutant to me, just a little bit. And then she had this whole weird thing where she tried to design an X-Men themed clothing brand, including Cyclops themed glasses that seemed in poor taste, to help fund the Avengers. And she referred to UX types as being depressing and not optimistic. Then in issue number 8 of that series, she makes another comment about the quote X-Men types and how they are keeping secrets. She just makes all these little snide comments about the mutant members of the team. She definitely has some kind of hate going on here. I don't care what you say, it's true. Wasp acts like all mutants are superheroes, for sure, but superheroes who don't know what they're doing, and that's rude. Number 6, Captain America. Captain America does not hate mutants. He stands against inequality, it's one of his things, fighting for the little guy. But gosh darn it, he sure seems to not care about them or their cause. Captain America and the Avengers in general don't usually think of the whole race of mutants when they make decisions, and that often leads to catastrophic events. A prime example being Avengers vs. X-Men. The X-Men knew from the very beginning that the Phoenix Force was coming to join with Hope Summers to revive the mutant species, and that if it didn't find Hope, it would destroy the Earth. They knew this because the mutant Cable went to the future, where the Avengers had succeeded in, quote, protecting Hope from the Phoenix Force, and it was bad. Cyclops made this pretty clear to Captain America and the Avengers, but they didn't trust the X-Men, this group of powerful mutants with decades of experience with the Phoenix Force, and who have hosts of the Phoenix Force among their ranks. The subconscious anti-mutant prejudice that Cap holds, coupled with his self-righteousness, causes him to not trust mutants and to think that he knows better than them. It's subtle for sure, but it's there all the same. Captain America has been at the center of many debates due to his willful negligence in regards to the mutant struggle. He doesn't hate mutants, but he also takes no noticeable action in their favor, nor does he like it when the X-Men threaten to overturn the current peace, even if it's for the betterment of their own species. But he does create the Unity Squad, so there's that. Number 5. Hawkeye. Look, Hawkeye is kinda just a bit of a jerk to everyone. And it makes a tiny bit of sense since he's constantly playing the compensation game with everyone else, since he's just a guy with a bow and an arrow. But man, does he say some problematic anti-mutant garbage sometimes. In Secret Wars, for example, without showing any anti-mutant sentiment before, Hawkeye grabs Cyclops by the scruff of his shirt and screams in his face, "You mutants stick together, huh? Well, sticking to a blood-soaked maniac like him doesn't speak well of you, pal." He was referring to Magneto, and well, fair point, Hawkeye, but what's all this "you mutants" talk? Look, I'm reaching for this one for sure, but in the Ultimate Universe, this sentiment is actually a bit more noticeable, and Hawkeye is certainly more of a jerk in general there. And he even took glee in taking out multiples of Multiple Man, although that was most likely because he was grieving. Look, just let me have this one, okay? Number 4. Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch is another unique choice for this list, as she herself is indeed a mutant. But it's the fact that she is a mutant that is why she is on this list in the first place. It is a gross understatement to say that Wanda has not had the easiest life. Being an Avenger for years, the team that she has always been more inclined to anyways, this mutant saved the world on many occasions, but the end of the Scarlet Witch's marriage to Vision and the loss of her children caused a mental breakdown. A breakdown that, coupled with her reality warping capabilities, caused the passing of a number of Avengers. Once the heroes decided that she needed to be dealt with, she warped reality to a world where Magneto was in charge of everything. But in the climax of that story, Wanda, in an extremely emotional moment, basically revealed her hate for mutants stemmed from the fact that being one has caused her so much pain and grief. She hated herself for being a mutant, and with 3 words, she then relieved almost all the mutants on Earth of their mutant abilities, putting the entire race into endangerment. Number 3. Tony Stark. Tony Stark, Iron Man, is on this list for an extremely similar reason to Captain America. As one of the leading men in the non-mutant superhero community, he makes some rather interesting decisions with some pretty selfish intent. Just like Captain America, I wouldn't say that Tony hates mutants or the X-Men, but I would say that he is usually ignorant to the horror which the X-Men have had to endure solely for being born different. For Tony, his example of not caring comes from the superhuman Civil War. Iron Man attempted to recruit the X-Men during Civil War, and Emma Frost rightly pointed out that the Avengers did absolutely nothing when Genosha was attacked by the Sentinels. 16 million mutants passed away, and the other heroes, Iron Man included, were almost nowhere to be found. But the bigger elephant in the room is that the act that Tony is even supporting in his Civil War is the Superhuman Registration Act, which itself was just an evolution of the Mutant Registration Act that purposefully segregated mutants for being who they were born to be. Tony didn't really care about that. He cared about having powerful pawns on his side. He would rather have them on his side since they are useful to keep around, but he doesn't actually care about their struggle, and he doesn't even fully trust them. Also, an imposter Tony Stark called them all filthy muties once, so there's that. Number 2. Reed Richards. Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four is not overtly a mutant or X-Men hater. The Fantastic Four, that he is arguably the leader of, have done their time and earned their place among the whole superhuman community, including among the mutants, as the Fantastic Four were one of the few groups who actively showed support of mutants, even if they didn't really know the best way to do so. But despite that, when things get personal, people's true colors come out for all to see. Reed may have not overtly said he hates mutants, but when it was revealed that Franklin Richards, his son, was actually a mutant, Reed then implanted a mutant nullifier into his own kid. He tried to fix Franklin despite the fact that he didn't try to do that when Franklin was not a mutant. I'd say that is pretty highly suspicious, and Susan Richards would probably agree with me. The people of the internet think this may have played a part in her trying to shack up with Namor. The worst part is Franklin wasn't actually a mutant. He just subconsciously used his vast powers to give himself an X gene. Reed needs to check himself. And finally, in at number 1, the Eternals. This may be a bit of an interesting choice. The hate for the X-Men here is almost an involuntary thing. So the Eternals, a celestial created experiment and offshoot of humanity, have an eternal struggle against another offshoot, the Deviants. Eternals have hardwired programming to protect the Celestials and to correct access deviation. A recent revelation about mutants and deviants causes the new Eternal leader, a pretty sinister guy by the name of Druig, to decide that the mutants represented excess deviation. Thanks to that, war is declared on all mutants, including obviously the X-Men. Following their programming, Eternal assassins come to Krakoa to destroy the Five. Massive war machine Eternals called the Hex are unleashed on Krakoa. Uranos, one of the oldest and nastiest of the Eternals, is unleashed on Arakko, and millions of mutants are taken out by the Eternals and their war machines. Now, to be totally fair, not all Eternals are on board with that. The main heroic Eternals like Thena and Icarus and Ajak and Makari split themselves off as separate Eternal factions trying to fix the situation, and when it reaches its crazy huge penultimate climax, things do go back to a bit of a normalcy, but for a while, their Eternals tried to wipe out the mutants simply for existing. They're kicking off the list at number 10 is the Hulk. The first rivalry Wolverine ever had in comic book history is with the Incredible Hulk. The Hulk is basically just a ball of increasingly strong muscle, and he just gets more and more strong the longer the fight goes on and the more mad he gets. He can dish out basically untold amounts of damage. As for Wolverine though, he can take untold amounts of damage, almost always coming back thanks to his incredible healing factor. Their rivalry began with the Incredible Hulk number 181, when Wolverine was first introduced to comics, coming in between the Hulk and Wendigo. Then in the Incredible Hulk number 340, Wolverine takes on the Grey Hulk, going into a berserker rage, ripping into the Hulk like never before. It's awesome to see, that is, until the Hulk heals and makes Wolverine one with the ground. Then there was World War Hulk X-Men, and I mean, it's World War Hulk. Wolverine gets completely hogwashed here. There was also Savage Wolverine number 5, when the Hulk and Wolverine randomly encounter each other in the Savage Land, and Wolverine actually takes the win here, using his claws to give Hulk one hell of a headache, before the Hulk comes to, and then gets eaten by a big old fish. And that's just regular Wolverine and Hulk. These two have had so many encounters throughout the multiverse, we could probably do a whole video on just that. Number 9, Cyclops. Wolverine has had quite the luck with the ladies over his incredibly long history, but despite that, he couldn't seem to let one girl go. That girl was Jean Grey. Jean Grey has pretty consistently declined the advances of our short temperamental Canadian in favor of her boo, Scott Summers, the consistent leader of the X-Men, Cyclops. They just make for a better couple despite Scott kind of being the worst all the time. And Wolverine? He just can't stand that fact. He is pretty consistent even to the point of being problematic with his advances towards Jean despite her constant rejections. But Cyclops is not a pushover. He is a pretty strong-willed leader and not someone who takes behavior like Wolverine's lightly, which has led to many clashes between the two over the years. The pretty immature rivalry over their teammate, which has gotten bloody on way too many occasions, starts as a basis, but over their history, these two have butted heads over more important things. For example, there was a pretty serious difference of opinion in how the X-Men and the students of the school they are an integral part of should be led, causing the Schism story. Or there was the whole X-Men versus Avengers thing. More recently though, the three mutants seem to be in some kind of weird throuple, so that's interesting. Number 8. The Thing. When thinking of characters who have a rivalry, I think The Thing often gets forgotten about. Everyone knows The Thing is a big old softy underneath his incredibly powerful exterior. But he and Wolverine? While these two do get along for the most part, they've got some history. During a fight that broke out between the two in Fantastic Four number 374, Wolverine lost control going into a bit of a rage, and he slashed Ben across the face with his adamantium claws. Normally, The Thing's rocky exterior can tank most damage, but adamantium is the strongest natural metal in the Marvel Universe, so this attack from Wolverine actually did quite a bit of damage, disfiguring the face of The Thing. The Thing is already conscious of the fact that he has a rather monstrous look, but despite that, he still felt the need to hide his injury to his face, along with the fact that he needed to protect it in order for it to heal. So to do both of those things, he was forced to wear a helmet while he recovered. It was a whole thing. He continued wearing the Doctor Doom-like helmet until Fantastic Four number 385, when it finally healed, and in Fantastic Four number 395, The Thing even forgave Wolverine and the heroes began to move past it. But you never really forget someone who disfigured you. I wouldn't know, but you never do. Number 7, Namor. If there's one thing Wolverine hates, it's probably when someone has a bigger ego than he does. And Namor, the king of Atlantis in the Marvel Universe, is one such person with one hell of an ego. Most of the time, he is just a smug jerk who is trying to put us all under the ocean. Other times, he's one of the hardest hitting teammates to have on your side. Namor plays it pretty fast and loose with the whole allegiance thing, and that's mainly because his allegiance is to Atlantis over almost anything else. Wolverine just ain't a fan of this guy, and as such, Namor ain't a fan of him either. Putting two guys with massive egos in close proximity to each other is never really a good idea. Fortunately for Logan though, I think Namor is still the more powerful of the pair. Fight me in the comments. Number 6, Punisher. My whole reason for this point on this list comes from one fight in 2 issues of a comic. In the early 2000s, Punisher faced off with Wolverine in Punisher number 16 and 17. Essentially, the Punisher found himself in the crosshairs of Logan when he needed to buy himself some time without Wolverine getting in his way. To do this, Punisher blows off Wolverine's face with a bit of buckshot in Punisher number 16. Thanks to his insane abilities though, Logan is still standing with his face already starting to heal over his exposed adamantium skull. So, obviously, that didn't buy the Punisher much time at all. Instead, in Punisher number 17, Frank Castle makes things just a little bit more below the belt. Literally, as he wiped Wolverine's gonads off of the playing field in a similar way to how he took off Wolverine's face. But of course, even this won't stop the mutants, so Frank Castle resorts to even more drastic measures. Needing the means to give himself a day or two before Logan will start coming after him again, the Punisher decides to use a steamroller to slowly but completely flatten Logan. And that's all I got. Number 5, Emma Frost. Wolverine and Emma Frost have been through plenty of tough times together. Being both mutants, they do have a lot in common and understand each other's struggles. Hell, they're both heroes with some questionable pasts, so of course they can relate to each other. But Emma was still originally a villain, and she has often been a rival to Jean Grey, making her life and her relationship with Cyclops more and more difficult, which, funnily enough, doesn't sit well with Wolverine. Only he can disrupt that relationship. Okay? When Jean sacrificed herself, Cyclops and Emma Frost made their weird telepathic relationship thing a real official relationship really soon afterwards. Logan immediately found this disrespectful to Jean's memory, because it was. While it seems to be water under the bridge now, Logan isn't really the type of person to let things go, and it's still highly likely that he resents Emma for the pain that she helped cause someone he loves. Jean. Also, Logan has to still be holding on to at least a little bit of animosity against Emma Frost thanks to her past with the Hellfire Club. In a more recent comic, Wolverine even comments on the fact that he and Emma wouldn't ever consider each other friends, but they're civil. So maybe hate isn't the right word, but it's not completely wrong either. Number 4, Venom. James Howlett and Eddie Brock have a lot in common. Both have bonded with the Clintar symbiote known as Venom, both are incredibly popular anti-heroes known for brutal tactics when dispatching evil. Wolverine and Venom have also crossed paths and fought on more than one occasion. The Claws and Webs story, Venom, Tooth and Claw, 2018's Venom Annual number 1, and Wolverine Exit Wounds number 1 all show us examples of these two anti-heroes coming to blows. And more often than not, despite the physical strength disadvantage, Wolverine usually comes out on top, usually humiliating Venom. But at the same time, while it might seem like Wolverine and Venom despise each other given the number of times they've fought, it was recently revealed in a Venom Annual that Eddie Brock owes Logan for putting him on the path towards becoming becoming an anti-hero. The issue flashed back to one of the earliest meetings between the two after Wolverine had taken victory over Venom. Logan relates how Professor Charles Xavier once gave a monster like him a chance to be better, and that he was now giving Venom the same thing, which helped to kickstart the anti-hero thing. So maybe they don't actually hate each other, but probably a little bit. Just a little smidge. Number 3. Deadpool. Look, these two may have worked together countless times in Weapon X and on X-Force, but that doesn't mean the Merc with the Mouth is a huge fan of Wolverine. Deadpool probably hates Wolverine more than anyone else on this list, but it's not for the same reason as anyone else here. It's actually because of jealousy. And in my eyes, I think that's born out of admiration, so if anything, maybe Deadpool actually loves Wolverine. But how do I know this? Well, in one storyline during Daniel Way's run, the two spent 3 or 4 issues trying to take one another off of the board, and that isn't necessarily out of character for either of them. But it was after Wade captured Wolverine that he starts to talk, revealing how much he actually hates the guy. Wade secretly feels that most people see him as just a poor man's version of Wolverine, so he continually has to prove that he's not that, but something better. Deadpool is one of those characters that we rarely see be serious, but this time I actually kind of felt it. I think he was serious. Number 2. Beast. For the longest time, I actually thought Beast was one of the better heroes out there, but that's because I didn't know Beast apparently. Beast is a Dr. Hank McCoy is one of the 8 smartest people in the world, and being smart in comic books seems to be a pretty easy path to being morally dubious. Don't get me wrong, Wolverine isn't a Boy Scout by any stretch of the imagination, but he still holds his morals. Wolverine and Beast were actually friends. Beast stuck with Wolverine during the Schism event, and he was also on the side of the Avengers with Wolverine during the Avengers vs. X-Men. But despite that, in order to deal with external threats to the new mutant nation of Krakoa, Beast has taken a position as the chief of the intelligence agency X-Force, which has almost completely cost him his morality. McCoy has chosen some questionably authoritarian actions to guarantee the Krakoan sovereignty, like sabotaging the country of Terra Verde, squirreling away funds to open a space station prison, and interrupting one of Wolverine's resurrections to attach an obedience collar to send Wolverine on clandestine operations, all of which was kept secret from the rest of X-Force. This ticked off Wolverine, which in turn ticked off Beast even more. Beast sent Wolverine on a mission so that he would be captured for an auction that Hank attended, and then he literally showed Wolverine to the afterlife in order to resurrect Logan again in a primitive state and turn him into Weapon X. Then Beast sent him on more missions. Beast has become a literal villain, and he just keeps getting worse and worse as time goes on. But finally, in at number 1, Spider-Man. I can't lie, it's really fun to see Spider-Man and Wolverine work together, because you've got one of the most quippy, lighthearted, inspiring, and morally positive heroes teamed up with one of the most grumpy heroes in the Marvel landscape. The thing here is that while these two may clash, they are almost like brothers. I think of it like Wolverine as a big brother and Spider-Man as a little brother. Spider-Man and his snarky ways has a knack for getting under the skin of Wolverine's short temper. Well, he hits on MJ, and he's a little too stabby for Peter Parker's no-killing preferences. They've clashed a few times, but one takes the cake. It should be obvious, but you don't ever dare insult Mary Jane Watson to Peter Parker's face. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 522, Peter is awoken with a call about a newspaper article claiming that Mary Jane has an entanglement with Tony Stark. It's not true, obviously, at all, and actually it's a setup by a different villain, but Peter gets out of his bed in Avengers Tower and goes looking for his wife. Along the way, he runs into Wolverine in a room with a very lovely high-up view of the city. Now, Logan decides to start going on about how Mary Jane messed up big time, and after a warning from Peter to stop, he decides to not do that and comments on her lack of brains. This lovely little comment gets Wolverine tossed through unbreakable glass from the penthouse level of Avengers Tower without so much as a second thought from Peter Parker, and it's great.
Number 10. Medusa. You could argue that Medusa really hated the X-Men at one point. Adam talked a bit about the Inhumans vs. X-Men event on part 1 of this list. While Black Bolt is their king, Medusa is or was at the time their queen. She herself had a pretty feisty exchange with Emma Frost during the conflict, who was leading her own team of X-Men, with the two women's conflict coming to blows and them actually fighting one another directly during the Inhumans vs. X-Men story. Following that conflict being resolved, Medusa even stepped down from her role as queen as a result. That's how much this whole thing affected her. The conflict with the X-Men left her feeling as though she had failed her own people by leading them into this war. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button? Thank you. Number 9. War Machine. There was a time when War Machine actually led his own team of Sentinels against mutants, or at least to observe and track mutants, which is still pretty bad, honestly. Sounds shocking, right? But it's true. He was chosen to become the direct commanding officer of his own Sentinel squad. Most Sentinels, of course, don't need a commanding officer because they themselves are like AI robots, which are used to attack and target mutant kind. But in this case, the Sentinels in question were piloted armor. The squad was known as Sentinel Squad 1, ONE, and they were part of 1, which stands for Office of National Emergency. 1 was basically activated by the President of the United States following the events of M-Day. While Rhodey himself is not known for really hating mutants, his actions here were definitely antagonistic towards them, even if he didn't perhaps see it that way at the time or intend it to be like that. I mean, you know, to Rhodey he's just working with the government, but also, I don't know man, I feel like if you're watching mutants that's pretty messed up. Number 8. Doctor Strange. What? The X-Men and Doctor Strange have beef? When? How? Why? Well, we're not talking about Stephen Strange here, but former Doctor Strange, Clea Strange, the wife of Stephen. The sort of wife of Stephen. Sort of. It's complicated. Basically his longtime love interest, who he is separated from, but who every now and then comes back to remind everyone, you know, she's still his wife, even though that point kind of seems murky at best, and I don't think they were ever actually formally married, but, you know, they do, or did, have rings. So, yeah. Clea during the Hellfire Gala of 2022 had some very tense moments with the mutants, not really specifically the X-Men as they stand now, but at least a former member of the X-Men, Emma Frost. Clea came to the gala and requested to speak to Emma in the hopes that she might be able to help her resurrect Stephen, who had recently died during the events of the death of Doctor Strange. It had just been revealed to the world that mutant kind had the power to basically bring back their dead, and Clea was basically hoping they might be able to help her in reviving Stephen. But, of course, Emma refused. Instead, actually suggesting that maybe Clea would be a better Sorcerer Supreme than her husband was. Now, despite this being technically a compliment, Clea did not take the response very well. She was actually pretty peeved. Number 7. Alpha Flight. After consulting with our resident Alpha Flight expert, Andrew, I learned that, as I suspected, Alpha Flight has had beef with the X-Men, mainly involving Wolverine. Despite the fact that Wolverine himself has been a member of Alpha Flight, the team have also constantly made attempts to kidnap Wolverine and take him back to Canada, because they basically have seen him as essentially government property. Well, that doesn't sound very polite or very Canadian-like to me as a fellow Canadian, but that's basically the tea there. Eventually, Wolverine and Alpha Flight would work things out, and currently they are on very good terms with the Knucklehead, but there was a time when they had a very real problem with the X-Men and some serious jealousy issues, it seems, in regards to their attachment to Wolverine, which, I mean, I kinda get. Wolverine's pretty cool. If he was on my team too and he was like, "Okay, I'm leaving," I'd be like, "No, get back here." I don't know if I'd kidnap him though. I feel like that's not very nice. Shouldn't go around kidnapping people. Number 6. Miss Marvel. Carol Danvers, now known as Captain Marvel, has had a complicated history with mutant kind, to put it mildly. Initially, her powers were stolen by then mutant villain Rogue. Rogue didn't even really mean to actually steal Carol's powers per se, it was kind of just a result of her attacking Carol that this happened, because, I mean, that's what Rogue does, those are her powers. She like takes the power away from people, takes their life energy, and you know, at the time her powers were very volatile and uncontrollable. She since has come into her own and even has become a hero, and is actually more well known for being a hero than a villain at this point, I'd say. And while even after Rogue became a hero, many of her powers, to this day even, still came and come from Carol Danvers, who was then known as Miss Marvel, there has also been a history of friendship with Carol and the X-Men team. Professor X and the X-Men actually took Carol in after she lost her memories and her powers following her interaction with Rogue. And Carol actually fought alongside the X-Men as part of their team for quite some time, basically being an ally to them, despite not even being a mutant. But she has definitely had a big beef with Rogue in the past, and Rogue has been an X-Man. We cannot deny either of these facts, so hence why she's on this list. Number 5. The Fantastic Four. We discussed how much Reed Richards seems to dislike the mutants on part 1 of this list, and while Adam also touched upon all the times the FF have actually worked alongside the mutant team as their allies, as has Reed. Remember when he made Dazzler that super pocket radio? Super cool. The whole team has actually gone up against the X-Men multiple times. In fact, they have 2 miniseries that are kind of based around that idea. The first one is from the 80s, Fantastic Four vs. the X-Men. Pretty like on the nose there with the title. And the second is more recent from 2020, titled simply X-Men/Fantastic Four. But it's less about X-Men and Fantastic Four coming together and a little bit more about why they clash with each other, at least at the beginning. The second ends with Professor X literally wiping Reed's mind of the knowledge of how to remove the X gene. No matter the reason, I don't think any of the FF would be down with involuntary mind wipes of any of their teammates, Reed included. Probably especially Reed. I mean, he needs that. He needs his mind to do science. Number 4, Punisher. The Punisher has an ongoing feud with one specific X-Man, and that's generally Wolverine. While the two have also teamed up together in the past, their relationship is often depicted as being rocky at best, and the two have come to blows multiple times. I would call this one more of an ongoing rivalry or feud that is mainly fueled by writers and fans who bicker about, which one of them is the toughest around, which one of them's the toughest guy. That's me being a fan that's just bickering about tough guys. Although I've definitely done that before and I don't sound like that when I do it. Or do I sound like that? Maybe I do. Personally, I would say Wolverine is tougher if I'm getting into that bickering argument debate with fellow nerds, both mentally and literally. But I also respect those who take Frank's side. After all, Frank is still a super tough person, and I'm not going to try to argue that he's not. Still really tough, so fair if you prefer Frank. Number 3, the Inhumans. We've now talked about Black Bolt and Medusa specifically on the channel, but the Inhumans in general kind of have good reason to hate the X-Men, thanks to mostly Emma Frost. Initially, the Inhumans were actually trying to cancel the feud with the X-Men in Inhumans vs. X-Men, also known by the short form name of IVX. Truly, this story was a little bonkers in regards to, making the conflict here make sense, but hey, if editorial comes to you and they say this is a story that has to happen, you kind of have to come up with some reason, so I don't even think we can blame creatives on this one, because I'm pretty sure this story came from editorial wanting it to happen, not creatives pitching it. The reason we were given here for this weird fight is that the Terrigen mists were released on Earth but ended up acting as basically a poison to the mutants. As such, the X-Men and mutant kind felt very targeted, and they did some not so cool things in response to try to hurt the Inhumans. Emma Frost led the charge and she pumped everyone up by staging a telepathic public death of Cyclops, which wasn't real, he had already died at that point, and this whole thing was blown out of proportion when the Inhumans initially actually tried to resolve this issue peacefully, but were attacked when they attempted to even extend an olive branch, which incited the war between the two groups. So while they didn't want to hate the mutants initially, that wasn't their goal here, it certainly did turn out that way by the end, or at least by the midway through the story. Though really everyone turned on Emma when they learned how she'd manipulated them, the mutants, into fighting against the Inhumans, because yeah, not a great look for Emma Frost. Number 2, Hulk. Hulk is well known for his beef with Wolverine. I mean, Wolverine literally first appeared in a Hulk comic where, he was the villain, or at the very least he was the antagonist of that tale. Hulk also at one point attacked the mutants during World War Hulk. Granted, he had less of a beef with the X-Men than he did with their at one time mentor Professor X, who he wanted due to his connection with the Illuminati, because at that time the Hulk was like, the Illuminati messed up my life. But still, the fact that the X-Men were not involved in what had happened to Hulk on the planet Sakaar did not stop him from attacking other mutants initially. They basically had to shame Hulk into walking away in order to survive that fight, and even then Hulk seemed like he didn't really want to back down. And of course there have been other mutants in the past who have come to blows with Hulk besides, so it's not even the only time that this has happened or the only folks that have been affected. Number 1, Avengers. I mean, we touched on it a bit on part 1 of this list when Adam talked about Captain America and Iron Man. He even talked about another few Avengers as well that have beef with the X-Men and mutant kind in general on his part 1. If you want to know who exactly was included, I highly recommend checking it out, but I digress. You've probably heard of a little well-known event called Avengers vs. X-Men. This event stood to highlight some of the feuds between the two teams and their individual members that have been brewing for basically years. Chiefly though, the fight was over the Phoenix Force in terms of the story here. The Phoenix was returning to bond with, as the mutants believed, its current ideal host, Hope Summers. The Avengers wanted it gone. The two fought each other, which now seems ironic since although the Phoenix has long been linked to mutants and mutant-based stories and the Avengers were very anti-Phoenix at that time, the Avengers now work with the Phoenix themselves as the Force is currently bonded with Avenger member Echo. So, love how they thought about it and then they were just like, well, that's now we're gonna use the Phoenix, now it's our buddy. Weird. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I was raised to believe that the word hate is a very strong word, so I'd more say that these are characters or groups who have actively had in my terms, a strong dislike for the X-Men or mutants in general at one point.
Number 10. Punisher. To be quite frank, you get it? Because his name is Frank Castle, and be frank is a saying, and I'm definitely the first person to ever make that joke. Like, ever. Okay, but back to my main point. Punisher hates a lot of people, but he has feuded with, the X-Men from time to time. Over the years, they have disagreed. Punisher has a very clear way of doing things, and that doesn't always line up with how the X-Men operate. He's also had beef with Wolverine on several occasions, which leads the two to fight each other. I mean, the Punisher even shot him in a not so pleasant place. Oh man, just thinking about that, yikes. Like, I know he can regenerate, but like, ouch. Like, that's, ugh. Number 9. Gambit. Now this one is interesting because Gambit has been a part of the X-Men. He's generally one of the more famous ones, but that hasn't stopped him from getting, annoyed with them. It's even gotten to the point where he turned on the team before because he believed he was in the right and they were in the wrong. Though, he was tricked by Mystique, and to be fair, he did start out as a villain of sorts and eventually made his way over to the good side. So he wasn't raised in the X-Mansion and like a lot of the other mutants. Also, like Punisher, he also has a rivalry with Wolverine. The two of them have had some very intense duels in the Danger Room, and I mean intense. Number 8. Iron Man. This one isn't a big surprise. Tony has clashed with a lot of superheroes. Civil War. One mutant who Iron Man has clashed with more so than others is Namor. The two have fought multiple times throughout the years, and during the Civil War event, Iron Man specifically told the X-Men just to stay out of it because clearly they didn't all agree. Number 7. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a likable guy, but that doesn't mean he gets along with everyone. He's had disagreements with the X-Men a few times. I mean, who hasn't, right? Clearly this list. Mostly with Wolverine, again, when the two of them were both Avengers. They were always bickering and could barely stand to be in the same room. Also, in season 2 of the 90s Spider-Man animated series, oh god, man, that show. Love that show so much. During the show, Spider-Man had a run-in with the X-Men in season 2, and when he started to have a problem with mutation. And let's just say things didn't go very smoothly. Multiple fights broke out between Spidey and multiple members of the X-Men. Number 6. Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers isn't the biggest fan of the X-Men. Well, not so much the X-Men in general, more like one specific person, Rogue. The two of them have had a long history of hating each other. When Carol Danvers returned to the Marvel Universe after a brief period away, she didn't have her memories or powers. She was later brought to Xavier to see if he could unlock her memories. And he did. Mostly. There were some that were permanently lost, and it turns out the culprit was none other than a teenage Rogue, who at the time was not working with the X-Men. Rogue used her abilities on Carol far longer than she should have, which ended up wiping her memories and taking away her abilities. Carol ended up getting, her newer cosmic powers later on, and Rogue eventually joined the X-Men. And you would think that time would have healed all those wounds, but no. The two still don't really like each other all that much. Number 5. The Fantastic Four. Over the years, all members of the Fantastic Four have had some sort of issue with the X-Men. But the reason I'm choosing to group them together as one is because of a fairly recent storyline between the two Marvel teams. It has to do with Reed and Sue's son, Franklin Richards, who is a mutant, a very powerful one. And in this new story, the two teams are going against each other because they both have a different idea of what to do with him. The X-Men believe that he belongs with them, but they also secretly want to study him because his powers are slowly depleting, and Xavier is worried it could start to have effects on other mutants. Meanwhile, the Fantastic Four believe Franklin should stay with them because he is a part of their family, but Franklin believes that his father is lying to him. Ooh, drama. Reed is trying to look for a cure to stop Franklin's powers from depleting, but Franklin believes Reed secretly wants his powers to be gone forever. Number 4. Blade. Blade's feud with the X-Men comes mostly from the Curse of the Mutant storyline, where Blade and the X-Men were working together to help with the vampire problem. Needless to say, things didn't go very well. Blade didn't really get along with a lot of them because Blade's mission is to kill vampires. But when Jubilee turned into one, Blade felt that, he had to take matters into his own hands and, just kill her. But obviously the X-Men disagreed and wanted to protect their own. Number 3. Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch is a complicated one because technically she is a mutant and and it was the daughter of Magneto. But then Marvel kind of changed her origin so that she wasn't anymore. It's all a little bit weird. She is also primarily an Avenger, and even ended up with, fellow Avenger Vision, and they had their own kids. But her disagreements with the X-Men have varied over the years. There was even a point during the House of M storyline where she used her powers and essentially took out almost the whole mutant community. So that's pretty big, if you ask me. And I know you didn't ask, I wanted to say it anyway. Number 2, the Hulk. Hulk doesn't get along with a lot of heroes. We all know that. To be fair, a lot of times people are kind of unfair toward him. I mean, they did send him away, which gave us Planet Hulk and World War Hulk, but his feud with the X-Men has been the cause of some very major fights, specifically Wolverine. Man, I am sensing a pattern here. Why is it always so many people are just, I don't like the X-Men, but more specifically, Wolverine. The Hulk versus Wolverine fights are usually always legendary. I mean, that was how Wolverine was first introduced during the Incredible Hulk 181. The two of them fought in the forests of Canada. Oh, Canada. Hulk even ripped Wolverine in half in Ultimate Hulk vs. Wolverine. Their feud also spawned the 2009 animated film Hulk vs. Wolverine. Is it weird that I kinda want them just to keep hating each other? I know, we get so many epic moments that way. Although, it is cool when they do decide to occasionally team up together. Number 1, Deadpool. Deadpool. Man, seriously. Deadpool's just awesome. He's just one of those unique and crazy characters, and not just in the Marvel universe, but in comics in general. There's no one else like him. Deadpool and the X-Men have had lots of encounters over the years, mostly because, he doesn't really agree with what they do, and they don't really agree with what he does. It's also been the inspiration of the Deadpool and X-Men live action films. In Deadpool 2, the main X-Men are specifically hiding from him because they just don't want to associate themselves with him. And even when he does join the team, he ends up killing someone, and Colossus, Colossus just doesn't take that well. So at the end of the day, the two of them don't really get along, and to Deadpool, that's completely fine.
Number 10, Quicksilver. Quicksilver has kind of played on both the good side and the bad side. So that right off the bat tells you that he's not good friends with all the X-Men, specifically Wolverine. This isn't just the case on the main Earth either. Wolverine and Quicksilver also have a funny relationship on Earth 1610. Also, Wolverine did find him annoying in Days of Future Past, even though, he went for him to help with breaking Magneto out of jail. The two of them just they weren't the bestest of friends. Number 9, Gambit. Gambit and Wolverine have a long history of not getting along. Seriously, ever since Gambit joined the team, there has been tension between the two of them. In Gambit's defense, Wolverine isn't the most loving and welcoming guy, but Gambit has been known to annoy a lot of people too. The two have fought in the Danger Room during Uncanny X-Men multiple times. And one of those was because Gambit became friends with Storm when he arrived, which made Logan mad. So you can kind of see why Gambit may not be so fond of the Canadian superhero. Also, the two of them fought in X-Men Origins Wolverine, so there's that as well. Number 8, Blade. Blade has clashed with Wolverine on multiple occasions, but one of the most famous ones was during the Curse of the Mutants storyline. You see, Blade kills vampires. That's his thing. But when Jubilee turned into one, he wanted to kill her because that's what he does. Which, of course, didn't sit too well with Wolverine, and the two disagreed over it. Which, obviously, didn't sit well with Blade. His mission is to kill vampires, and when you get in the way of that, it annoys him. So, odds are, he probably won't like you very much after that. Which is the case with Wolverine. Number 7, Emma Frost. Emma Frost is usually against the X-Men. But, like a lot of people in the Marvel Universe, she changes sides sometimes. It happens, and we just need to deal with it. But, when she does come to the good side, it's never perfect. Emma is very close with Cyclops, and she hates Jean Grey. Wolverine loves Jean, and isn't the biggest fan of Cyclops. So, whenever there's a feud, Emma is always on Scott's side, and goes against good old Wolverine. They call each other a lot of mean names. And, can we not just all get along, guys? Come on. Who am I kidding? This is just the comics. We need feuds. Makes everything more interesting. We love that juicy drama, even if we don't admit it. Number 6, The Punisher. Oh man, Frank Castle does not like Wolverine. The two of them have never really gotten along. Frank shot him somewhere very unpleasant. Very, very unpleasant. It's a good thing that Wolverine has his amazing healing factor. God. But regardless, it would still hurt. But basically, Wolverine kind of interferes with Frank's work. And Punisher tells him to back off. Wolverine's like, no, no thank you, but then they fight. But Frank basically destroyed Wolverine at one point. His face was ripped off, and then he got crushed, completely crushed. It's actually really weird and disturbing, but hey, Those two words perfectly sum up Frank Castle. Really weird and disturbing. But in a good way, I guess. Number 5, Namor. Namor has had a lot of feuds with a lot of people. Namor does have kind of a big ego, so I think that's also usually the cause, but not always. I mean, if this list is any indication, a lot of the time it's Wolverine who gets on someone else's nerves. That's just who he is. Wolverine and Namor have fought on multiple occasions, with both of them having won one of those fights at one point or another. But at the end of the day, they just seem to have completely different ideas of how to deal with certain situations. Maybe one day, we will even get to see this feud on the big screen, since the MCU now has access to both of these characters. That'd be so cool. Although, it would have been even cooler to see Hugh Jackman's Wolverine interact with Namor and all the other heroes, but sadly, I guess that's probably not going to happen anymore. But hey, there's also a multiverse. I'm just saying. Number 4, Deadpool. Wade and Logan. Logan and Wade. Will these two ever get along? Probably not. They fight all the time, and both get on each other's nerves. Even in the films, this is the case, and I don't think Wade will ever forgive Logan for allowing him to be an X-Men Origins Wolverine. That seems to be a tender spot for him. I mean, he time traveled to change it at the end of Deadpool 2. He shot himself in that. Although, he does love Hugh Jackman, as he stated multiple times, so that's a bright spot in the relationship. But as for just Wolverine and Deadpool, I don't know if the two will ever get along. It's just hard for them. Number 3, Spider-Man. You're probably thinking to yourself, hey, Spider-Man is such a good guy, how could he hate anyone? Well, I wish that was true, but like everyone on this list, he's not so fond of, yeah, you guessed it, Wolverine. I mean, the two of them starred in a comic called Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, and they have fought multiple other times. Wolverine is not the biggest fan of the webhead either, so it kind of evens itself out, right? That's how it works. Yeah, that's how it works. Well, regardless, the two still have worked together, but that doesn't mean they always like each other. But this is something I want to see on the big screen. Wolverine and Spider-Man interacting or duking it out. Come on, Marvel, we need this. Even if it's during some weird multiverse event. Hugh Jackman, Tom Holland, it'd be so cool. Come on, guys. We need to get this trending. Hugh Jackman and Tom Holland meeting as Wolverine and Spider-Man. That would be one of the biggest cinematic crossovers. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Number 2, Hulk. These two have hated each other ever since, well, Wolverine was first introduced. Literally, Wolverine debuted in a Hulk issue and the two of them fought. And they have really been friends since. I mean, sometimes Hulk is the one that kind of starts this whole feud, but let's be honest, it's mostly Wolverine. I mean, one time Wolverine just stabbed Hulk in the head for no reason at all. Hulk was just like, hey guys, I'm here to help, and then Wolverine just was like, nope, stab you in the head. They even hate each other in the Ultimate Universe, and the Old Man Logan comic. I mean, in the Ultimate Universe, Hulk ripped Wolverine in half. But in Logan's defense, in the Old Man Logan comic, Hulk is a little weird. I mean, he's even a little weird in Ultimate Universe. Everyone's weird in the Ultimate Universe. There was even an animated film, Hulk vs. Wolverine. Their rivalry is legendary, and fans like it that way. But Hulk does have some valid reasons to hate him. Number 1, Cyclops. I think everyone knew this was going to be number 1. Man, these guys hate each other for one reason. Well, actually kind of a few different reasons, but one main reason. And I think we all know what it is. Huh? Okay, I'm assuming everyone probably just said it at the same time. Jean Grey. They both like Jean a lot. Scott was dating Jean, and then Wolverine showed up, and then this whole love triangle started. I mean, they have duked it out multiple times, and Wolverine has even, started dating Jean at one point. Also, Wolverine doesn't really respect Scott as a leader, and that kind of angers Scott. But hey, Wolverine doesn't really respect anyone's leadership, so come on, Scott, don't take it personally. A lot of people hate Wolverine. That is why this whole list exists in the first place. But regardless, they still work together from time to time, but I just don't think that Scott will ever really truly be good friends with Logan. Alright, there you have it, guys, the top 10 superheroes who hate Wolverine. What does your list look like? Let us know down in those comments below, and if you didn't hate this video, you see what I did there? Because the video is about hating someone. Yeah, okay. No, I know it was a bad joke, right? I'm completely aware.
The X-Men and mutant kind have had many villains over the years. Some of their vendettas are more personal, and not all of them hate mutants, but these ones most certainly do. Senator Robert Kelly is a complex figure who started out as a politician that avidly opposed and even seemed to hate mutants. Really, Kelly was worried about mutants, and he feared what their growing mutant population might bring about. He's an interesting foe when it comes to his hatred of mutant kind, as he's actually kind of one of the more level-headed and even somewhat reasonable enemies of the X-Men when it comes to how he feels about mutants. Kelly mostly just wants what is best for humankind, which means that he can be reasoned with at times and even has allied himself with mutants. While he's also certainly become involved in plots that are centered around mutant oppression and even in some cases mutant destruction, in the end he does come around after his life has been saved multiple times by mutants during attempted assassination plots. However, after realizing the error of his ways and reconsidering his stance on mutants, he was then unfortunately killed in one of those assassination attempts, which managed to actually succeed, even with Cable attempting to protect him. Which other villains do you think could or should be redeemed? Do you think any of the people that hate mutants can be redeemed? I mean, I feel like Kelly was, but I don't know. Although the creation and formation of unity we saw from mutant kind during the Dawn of X era caused programs who would use mutants as test subjects and as a means to advance human evolution to shut down, that does not mean that the people behind those organizations disappeared completely. In fact, it seems that instead the few people left who still believed in those programs found one another and created a more secretive organization in the shadows known as Xeno. Xeno was the group behind the assassination of Charles Xavier in the X-Force series, and while Xavier was of course successfully resurrected, Xeno still created quite a shiver of panic among the mutants of Krakoa. A shiver down Krakoa's spine. I don't know if the island has a spine, but if it did. Xeno are ruthless, resourceful, and terrifying in their methods, successfully using the captured Domino skin to ensure their assassination team's success. Yikes. And also ick. I love these ladies so much. They're basically a villainous eco-terrorist version of the Golden Girls group. They are sassy elderly women who used to work for corrupt and greedy biotech companies who did not care about the effects of their work in regards to the planet's well-being. As such, these women decided to fight back. They planted their own seed within all the companies, hoping to infiltrate them over time so that they would then have control of all plant life on Earth, deciding what grows and what does not grow. However, with the Krakoa's miracle plants and miracle medicine hitting the market as a result of the mutant nation being recognized globally, their plans, of course, were threatened. Horticulture formed, and these four women, Opal, Lily, Augusta, and Edith, threatened the mutants of Krakoa. This group is a little lighter when it comes to, I would say, their hatred of mutant kind. Really, they kind of just hate anyone who opposes them and anyone who harms the Earth. That's what they're all about. They're all about just like, we want to make sure that plants are alright. That's their plan. So when they first attacked, it was with a green sticky substance that appeared to neutralize mutant powers, and they actually vowed to either cause Krakoa to join them, or they would basically cut them down like a weed. So they were just basically like, look, we don't have to hate you, but don't be a jerk. Probably one of the worst mutant-hating villains, or perhaps in terms of how much he hates them, one of the best, I guess you could say, in this regard, is Reverend William Stryker. Stryker sees mutants as demons, and due to his own personal beliefs and experiences, he believes it's basically his true divine calling to like eradicate them. He has been a villain of the X-Men, Wolverine, and he's also of course been affiliated with the Weapon X program. Yeah. I really love Brimstone Love. Such a fun, weird villain. Brimstone Love is a seemingly complicated villain in the Earth 616 reality. He initially appeared as an alternate reality villain, appearing first in the 2099 alternate future reality of Earth 928. There he is a sadistic villain who's obsessed with misery and pain and seems to thoroughly enjoy tormenting mutants specifically, despite also being a mutant himself. In the Earth 616 reality, he created his Theater of Pain in response to the creation of Krakoa, but would later seemingly join the mutants during Fall of X after Orcis attacked at the Hellfire Gala and ended up seizing enough power and control to almost completely eradicate planet Earth of mutants. Kind of strange, but I also haven't read what he did later. I've only read the other stuff in Marauders, and I was like, that's a pretty crazy change of heart, but alright. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have actually succeeded, even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer to those who wanted it. Destiny knew that any cure that was created would essentially become weaponized and forced on mutants regardless of their own wants or their desires. For those who haven't been reading along recently with the events of the current X line of comics, it was of course revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose power was basically reincarnation in her own form. When Moira died in her life, she was basically reborn as herself, but with all the memories of her past life, and then she would relive her whole life again and she could do things differently if she wanted to. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of Earth 616, which actually seems to be tied to Moira's existence in her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a weapon of Forge's design, which of course zaps mutants of their powers. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information. And also she's completely crazy now. It was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being like their last hurrah in terms of Moira's evil plan. Also pretty sneaky evil plan to be like, I'll give them Krakoa, they'll never know, they'll think I'm working with them, and they'll all die out. While the heroic Marauders team might operate separately from the X-Men, they were initially made up of a lot of former and current X-Men members, including one of the original team members, Bobby Drake. And that initial roster also included Storm as well. Man, that initial roster was OP. This team, led by Captain Kate, ended up going up against the anti-mutant organization Homines Verendi, which is composed of former Inner Circle members of the Hellfire Club. Also, can we just acknowledge how great the Hellfire Trading Company was though? Separate of course from Homines Verendi, and we're talking about that too, but also, man, Hellfire Trading Club, what a great time. Homines Verendi were previously known as the unofficial Hellfire Brats, and were originally part of the Hellfire Academy. The team also has their own White Queen, their own Black King, and the like, similar to the Krakoa's Quiet Council and of course the former Hellfire Club. Although today we know the Hellfire Club as being a mainly mutant villain group when they are being villainous, which more recently of course evolved into the Hellfire Trading Company during the Krakoan era, becoming somewhat more heroic in their pursuits, or at the very least more neutral, considering that Sebastian Shaw was still heavily involved and of course sometimes up to no good. It might surprise you to learn that when the Hellfire Club started, mutant hate was actually one of the things that was on their agenda. Oh yeah, or at least shortly after they started. Maybe like mutant hate is a bit of a strong word, but I would say it's hate that stems out of, you know, like most people, their fear of mutants. Early on, the club became involved with Donald Pierce, and at one point they were actually attempting to hunt down mutants with their own sentinels. It wasn't until the seeming death of Sebastian Shaw's fiancée, Lord Chantel, that the mutants who were a part of the Hellfire Club, the few of them, rose up and overthrew the ruling Inner Circle, taking the club for themselves, while later on recruiting other mutants in to influence its ranks. And of course Sebastian Shaw and Emma Frost being a couple of the top dogs in terms of the mutants that we had at that time. Albert Carey made his first appearance in the X-Force 2022 annual. Here he appears as a scientist working for Orcis. In the annual he appeared in, Carey went up against Wolverine, Domino, and Quentin Quire's Kid Omega. Honestly, that would probably be pretty challenging. He planned to do a short burst of tests on the captured mutants after luring them into a trap. He planned on them dying during these tests, but on keeping the data of said tests to learn from. While they stole the motherboard which stored information for the potential devices and stratagems that they were actually testing at that time, Albert Carey, who seemingly ran the tests, was pretty confident that with time they could actually rebuild what they lost, and more vitally, he saw it actually as a win in that they now have more information, which opens up new knowledge and possible future questions and experiments as a result. I feel like we haven't really seen any more of him, but I feel like that was a cool seed that we planted. Will we come back to it? Did we come back to it and I missed it? Let me know. One of the biggest bads in terms of mutant hate groups I would say right now in the comics still has to be Orcis. Orcis was made up of various influential groups, some of them villainous, some not, who were brought together investing their money, their time, and their resources in the pursuit of basically combating and nerfing mutant evolution. Krakoa was such a big deal that it literally united everyone under the umbrella of Orcis to pool their resources and rally against mutant advancements and mutant independence in the future that the island nation had promised. Basically, if you all unite to create a really awesome mutant superpower, your enemies and sometimes your allies will also unite to make sure that that power isn't too powerful or maybe doesn't exist at all.
Let's kick it off with a big bang, or something that may have predated the Big Bang, the Phoenix Force. There really isn't a question about how strong the Phoenix Force is. It is one of the most powerful beings in the universe, the Marvel universe at least. It has unlimited power, and it's not just a high-level threat, it's been deemed an extinction-level threat. No one really knows how it works, which I think works in its favor. If you don't know how the thing works, you don't know how to defeat it probably. The Phoenix Force has warped reality on a universal scale before, which is not an easy feat. The X-Men are definitely grateful the Force has taken to Jean Grey, because otherwise a fight against it would be near impossible to win. Not to say they haven't fought it, they have, they just usually are fighting the Force when it is attached to Jean, so she can help like from the inside. The Phoenix Force in its usual state is neither good nor bad. It's when it became the Dark Phoenix that panic set in. Dark Phoenix was a villain, evil, craved destruction, it wasn't cute. Sabretooth is a toothache, persistent, annoying, and has the potential to be a bigger problem than you think. Victor Creed has been around forever. Not really, he was born in the 19th century, but with all the problems he has caused, it feels longer. Mainly, Sabretooth is focused on hurting Wolverine, but he does not discriminate, he will attack anybody. Sabretooth is very similar to Wolverine, some argue even stronger. One classifies him as a severe threat, I agree. He has an incredibly powerful healing factor and superhuman senses, claws are on each of his fingers and toes, and he has fangs. Pretty standard stuff when it comes to mutants honestly, but he becomes way more threatening when you take his life experience into account. He spent a lot of time over his long life training, working with multiple organizations including Hydra, the CIA, and Weapon X. He learned to fight, to track and hunt, to shoot accurately, manipulate and gaslight like it's an Olympic sport, and just overall sharpen his intellect. He was adamantiumed twice, the first time by Apocalypse and then the second by Weapon X. In a surprising turn of events, Professor X and Magneto accidentally created a merged persona. His name is Onslaught, and he is the worst. Onslaught was created after Magneto ripped the adamantium off Wolverine's bones, and Professor X kind of lost it and made Magneto catatonic. Turns out when that happened, Professor X absorbed Magneto's emotions, and then those merged with the darkness inside Professor X that he'd kept hidden away, and boom, we have Onslaught. Onslaught stayed hidden away for a long time. It was when Professor X's astral body was brought to the physical plane by Nate Gray that he was freed. Onslaught took over Professor X and attempted to get the X-Men to try and work against humanity. The X-Men were like, absolutely not. Onslaught got upset and started absorbing mutants and other powerful beings. It took the X-Men, Fantastic Four, and the Avengers to destroy Onslaught. It makes sense considering he had the powers of Magneto and Professor X in one body. Nathaniel Essex has gone by many names and clones, but no matter which version is out there, he is a nuisance. Originally, he was a low-level threat, just a human scientist, but then he was genetically modified by Apocalypse. That's when he became Mr. Sinister. He was really focused on machines and accurately predicted that they would someday take over the world, so to combat this, he had the genius idea to create his own AI that would be better than all the other AIs. What could go wrong? Nathaniel wanted to become a Dominion, and that is the highest level of interstellar intelligence. Dominions exist outside of space and time, and they're basically gods. They are so strong that very few things are considered threats to them, the Phoenix Force being one actually. On Nathaniel's journey to reach this status, he created 3 clones of himself and 1 clone of his wife. One continued with Mr. Sinister, one would become Dr. Stasis, his third would be Orbis Stellaris, and his wife's would be Mother Righteous. Each clone had a purpose to investigate so that the necessary info could be gathered to turn Nathaniel into a Dominion. Each of these clones caused problems for the X-Men at some point too. Eventually Nathaniel did reach his goal and took on the title Enigma. Enigma has been kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes for a long time since it exists outside of space and time. For the most part, Enigma doesn't bother the X-Men too much, it's his clones that cause the most trouble. The Nimrod, that is Nimrod, caused quite a stir at the 3rd Hellfire Gala, left such a lasting impression that I had to include it. Nimrod is a type of sentinel, so there are multiple Nimrods out there. There was one in Days of Future Past, but this one right now is the one that attacked the Hellfire Gala. The head of Orcis, at the time of its creation, created this Nimrod from a place of grief after losing her husband. She placed her husband's conscious consciousness into the robot's head, but then it got erased after an attack on the Orcis facility. Now this very powerful robot has no humanity in it, and it vows to put an end to mutants. So the robot is a bit messed up. The robot worked with an Omega Sentinel to trap and off Professor X. Then the robot worked with Orcis, the organization, which we will talk about in a second. That's when the Hellfire Gala was attacked. This was a brutal attack on mutants, Icemen, many new X-Men members, and Juggernaut did not make it out. This robot was created to protect humanity from mutants, but Nimrod went a little haywire and started wiping out humanity instead. But Nimrod came from somewhere, and that was Orcis. Orcis is an organization created to preserve humans, designed to prevent mutant ascendancy over humanity. It turns out mutants were appearing at an alarming rate to those people and were set to surpass the human population sooner rather than later. Orcis is extreme. They caused the biggest drop in population for mutants since M-Day, and that was the attack on the Hellfire Gala mentioned in the Nimrod point. When that attack took place, around the world and at the gala, about 250,000 mutants were taken out. That is a strong and organized organization if I've ever read one. To top it off, they also messed with Krakoa's main export that had the world accepting the island in the first place. The export was like the fauna of the island. It had healing properties and was used in lots of human medicines. Orcis messed with it and made it so that any human that ingested the tampered export would pass away. This was revealed to the world with the message that for every mutant on Earth, a human would be harmed for it. So now the remaining mutants couldn't stay on Earth anymore or had to go into hiding. Thankfully, the remaining mutants were able to regroup and strike back, defeating the organization before all the life on Earth could be wiped out. Apocalypse has faced off against the X-Men, each time more harrowing than the last. He is pretty extreme in his thinking, believing very strongly in a survival of the fittest philosophy, which makes sense. He is the first of the second generation of mutant kind, so he is the fittest, and his life has just been one surviving horror after another. That doesn't excuse his behavior though. Apocalypse does have a job. He was employed by the Celestials to ensure evolution takes its natural course. With the job came some perks like getting enhanced with Celestial tech, making his already powerful form even more of a threat, even godlike. He would go into periods of hibernation so he could rest and then technically live longer. When he woke up in the modern age, his first order of business was to cause a major conflict between mutants and humans. Nap time is over, it is go time now. One thing about Apocalypse is that he is always moving forward, always literally evolving into the best, most powerful version of himself. He can't stay dead, but he can be taken out of the picture for a while, but unfortunately, he will always come back. A quick list of some of the things Apocalypse is capable of: matter manipulation, self-atomic manipulation, telepathy, flight, telekinesis, and various celestial energy manipulation like teleportation, for example. If you thought Apocalypse was bad, wait till you meet his wife. Genesis is an Omega level mutant capable of beating Annihilation in god form in one-on-one combat. She mentally controls the plants in her general vicinity, that's her main deal, including the flora that might be inside you, kinda. Vegans better watch out. Genesis doesn't necessarily control the plant life in you to make you do whatever she wants, though I'm sure that's probably the next step for her. What she uses the flora for is to spy on you and even track you. She is one of the characters that spends a lot of time wearing the Annihilation helm. Her and her husband were the rulers of Akara, their children, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Genesis is very skilled in combat and the process of war because she is a millennia old and has been fighting a war for most of her life. The one between Amenth demons and the mutants of her world, and that the X-Men eventually did get involved in too. I guess you could say she started out good, she was just fighting for her people after all, but when she defeated Annihilation and then had to take on his helm, she got corrupted, and that's when her true villain era started. That's when she started conquering places and starting new wars. She was only defeated when the golden helm was knocked from her head. So I've done all this yapping about Annihilation and his helm, but I have not yapped too much about him, so who is he? Annihilation is a dark god residing in the darker world known as Amenth. He rules demons. He is kind of like the Satan of his world. He is very old, he is so old, he has myths and legends about him. One such myth puts in perspective just how powerful this dark god is. It is said that Annihilation is the spirit of Amenth in physical form. Annihilation's energy lives in the golden helm of Annihilation. Those that wear it get possessed with his powerful spirit, and that's how he fought the X-Men. He did it through Genesis. Annihilation's influence is incredibly powerful. Apocalypse is one of the only known things that can hold him off, so this trio of Apocalypse, Genesis, Annihilation is kind of like rock, paper, scissors. Apocalypse beats Annihilation, Annihilation beats Genesis, and Genesis beats Apocalypse. Eventually, the Golden Helm was made into a staff. It had less of an influence over people that way. It wasn't destroyed until Storm came into contact with it, and then she destroyed it because it started whispering to her. I had to put Magneto in first place. I literally have no choice. Magneto might not be a cosmic creator of the universe or capable of destroying a universe with a flick of his wrist, but he has been causing problems for the X-Men for decades, pretty much since the start, and is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful mutant on Earth, so he gets first place. I think my favorite Magneto thing that proves he is a danger to society is that the world literally has a protocol to deal with him. Magneto protocols. You know you've made it in the villain world when people prepare in advance to deal with you, even if you aren't planning anything yet. Magneto also has a very personal stake in the game when it comes to fighting the X-Men and mutants. Him and Professor X were literally best friends. Having to incapacitate your best friend is a really hard thing to do. Plus, when you go to the root of why Magneto does what he does, his message is one that some people can agree on. His actions are just a bit extreme. So people might agree with his message and then get radicalized later. Magneto, with all the horrible things he has done, it could have been worse. His ability to control magnetism is not just metal and magnets for anyone new here. He controls magnetic fields too, which has numerous evil possibilities. We learned how far Magneto was willing to go for his cause when Magneto protocols were activated and he couldn't return to Earth. The combo of that and the X-Men coming after him made Magneto stop holding back, and he ripped the adamantium off Wolverine's skeleton. To make matters worse, Magneto is actually competent and smart. Hate it when your enemy actually knows what they're doing. The day Magneto permanently joined the X-Men on Krakoa was a good day indeed.